Today we're going to talk about Democrats finally actually winning the messaging war, and I interview Pete Buttigieg about J.D. Vance's attacks on Tim Walz's military service, Trump's disastrous comments on Kamala Harris's race, and he compares the joy of the Harris campaign to the doom and gloom of the Trump campaign. And I'm joined by historian and star Substack writer Heather Cox Richardson to discuss the dangers of Trump's agenda and how history shows us how that agenda will lead us into autocracy. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. Let's be clear, for my entire career in political media, Democrats have not only been losing the messaging war, but have been complaining about losing the messaging war. When you look back at the days of Obamacare, for example, while Democrats were trying to explain the individual mandate and the implications of the ACA and Medicare Part D, you know what Republicans were doing? They were claiming that it would lead to death panels. That's it, death panels. And you know what? It was their narrative that stuck. Short, pithy, impactful. The next elections after that would lead to perhaps the most devastating results in living memory for Democrats. By the time Obama left office, Democrats went from controlling 27 state legislatures to only 13. We lost 13 governorships and 816 state legislative seats. It was the biggest loss in power since Eisenhower. Cut to the Trump era, we're still getting killed. At least for Trump's audience, his message is concise, it's catchy, it's compelling. Build the wall, lock her up, drain the swamp, make America great again. All the while, we're still complaining about our inability to message. Biden comes along, he wins in 2020, very much on the back of anti-Trump sentiment, but in 2024, he again can't prosecute the case against Trump. Even in the face of such aggressively dismal policies by Donald Trump, the narrative is so bad that the only thing the media can focus on is Biden's age. Our message clearly isn't breaking through. And then Kamala Harris and Tim Walz enter the scene. They're both articulate, inspiring public speakers who connect with normal people because they communicate like normal people. And suddenly, it's the Democrats who seemingly overnight learned how to capture an audience with clear catchphrases that electrify tens of thousands of people. Catchphrases like, "We're not going back."
But we are not going back. We are not going back. Not going back. We're not going back. We are not going back.
Like, when we fight, we win.
And when we fight, we win. God bless you and God bless the United States of America.
And even this one that only Tim Walz can deliver.
In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
And in fact, one of the most potent tools against Republicans is actually the simplest one that was debuted by Tim Walz himself, which is that Republicans are just weird. And despite its simplicity, it does seem to be the one that's getting under the skin of these Republicans the most, probably because, as they say, a hit dog will holler. That attack has such legs that, according to the New York Times, at an August 2nd fundraiser for Trump, when a donor asked Trump about Democrats trying to paint the Republican ticket as weird, Donald Trump replied, "Not about me, they're saying that about JD." Dude didn't even deny it. He just deflected and then threw his own running mate under the bus. So that we're clear, that is not what you do when the attack doesn't have legs. Meanwhile, Trump's best retort to the messaging juggernaut on the left, well, he's claiming that Tim Walz is going to unleash hell on earth. Tim Walz, the high school social studies teacher, the guy who's best known for signing a bill into law that would guarantee breakfast and lunch for school children regardless of income status. Right, good luck with that one. The fact is that our tent is growing, welcoming many of the constituencies who Donald Trump himself needs. Young people, rural Americans, teachers, union workers, blue-collar workers, military members, Republicans who have chosen to prioritize our democracy. No fake outs or recycled lies about audience sizes or feigned big boy confidence is going to change that. Granted, that doesn't mean we can sit back and exhale. We still have less than 3 months, and everybody needs to do their part. The next 3 months will be impossible to forecast, although I guess it's safe to say it's probably going to be kind of weird. But none of that should distract us from the potential of electing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who are fearless bully fighters, happy warriors, and effectively the living embodiment of the promise of America. So our job is to make sure we get to work, because when we fight, well, you know. Couple quick notes. This is finally the week. My book, Shameless, is officially out for sale. If you enjoy this show, please show your support by ordering a copy this week, which is really my shot at hitting the New York Times bestseller list. As you know, I don't do sponsorships or paid ads. I never put my content behind a paywall. I never will on this channel. But this is the one time that I'll ask you for something back, and that's to grab a copy of Shameless if you can. You can click the link in the post description or go to briantylercohen.com/book or click the link right here on this screen. Also, if you live in DC and you want to see me live with Jen Psaki in just a few days on August 14th, or if you live in LA and you want to see me live with Jon Favreau on August 26th, there are still a few tickets left to both of those events, which you can find at the same link, briantylercohen.com/book, or in the post description of this video. Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, here are previews of my interviews with Pete Buttigieg and Heather Cox Richardson. What was your reaction to Vance qualifying the value of Waltz's 24-year military service to this country?
Yeah, this is just not something that service members ordinarily do toward other service members. There's some notable exceptions, including the disgraceful swift boat attacks against John Kerry, which we're not going to allow to happen again, especially because Tim Walz served honorably. He served for 24 years. In the military, you can retire at 20 years. Tim Walz served for 24, which I'm pretty sure is longer than J.D. Vance had been alive when he finished his tour. None of us are saying bad things about J.D. Vance's service. We're talking about a campaign that not only is building up our candidates and why we believe in Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, but most importantly, talking about what this campaign means for people in their lives. And I think that's the other really interesting and important thing to talk about. It's not just that Tim Walz served and by all accounts was a very good soldier and non-commissioned officer. It's that after that, he went on to lead the Veterans Affairs Committee in the House and make veterans better off on things like mental health and suicide prevention. So it's unsurprising and yet still somehow disappointing that the only thing they can think to do is to go after his service. But maybe the upshot of it is it's going to remind everybody and educate everybody about the fact that Tim Walz is a veteran who served 24 years in the military.
It also seems to have escaped J.D. Vance that his own running mate did the thing that Vance is wrongly accusing Tim Walz of doing, which is evading his service. So do you think that maybe J.D. Vance forgot that Donald Trump very famously found some podiatrist somewhere to say that he had bone spurs to ensure that he wouldn't serve a single day in the military?
Yeah, the contrast couldn't be clearer. Look, both Tim Walz and J.D. Vance came from ordinary beginnings and served in the military. Donald Trump, on the other hand, used his status as a multi-millionaire from the day he was born to be able to, it would appear, purchase a doctor's note that allowed him to fake a disability so that he could claim to be unable to go serve. And I imagine some middle-class or working-class kid went in his place who wasn't rich enough to pull those kinds of strings. That's exactly the point. They don't want to talk about that. They definitely don't want to talk about their ideas for America or Americans. So they do what they always do, which is just to tear down, tear up, and do whatever is most outrageous any given day so that they don't have to defend things like what their policies would mean for veterans, which I think would be a lot of cuts to services, and more generally, they're deeply unpopular policies like tax cuts for the rich and continuing to destroy a woman's right to choose.
Donald Trump's plan, if he wins the election, is to consolidate power into the executive branch. In my opinion, the most chilling part of Project 2025, for example, is the reclassification of career civil servants in our government's workforce into political appointees. And that would effectively turn the entire government, the IRS, the FBI, the DOJ, the FCC, into a tool of Trump's political interests. So this may all feel new for us, but I'm curious as to whether there's precedent in history where, for example, leaders engaged in similar tactics and what happened to that system of government in those instances. So, for example, did those countries then descend into autocracy?
Well, there are comparisons in other countries for sure. Project 2025, which is the project that's been embraced by the Trump Vance campaign, deliberately builds on what Viktor Orban has done in Hungary, where he took a democracy and he overturned it by concentrating power in his own hands. Now, one of the things about Project 2025 is that it talks about civil servants and turning them into loyalists for Trump. It also talks about taking over the Department of Justice and ceasing to honor the rule of law and instead having people in the Department of Justice who do what Trump wants them to. It also talks about the military. So the idea is to concentrate all of those positions of power in our society in the hands of one person. Now, if you look at Hungary, modern Hungary under Viktor Orban, he did something very similar with the idea quite explicitly of destroying democracy and creating what he called illiberal democracy or Christian democracy, a world in which a few, usually white heteronormative men controlled the lives of women, racial and ethnic minorities, and gender minorities in order to return what they considered a traditional worldview to their country. Now, this has really never happened in the United States before. And one of the things that I think is important when you think about Project 2025 is to think of it in tandem with the July 1st, 2024 Supreme Court decision in Donald J. Trump versus United States, in which today's radical Supreme Court overturned the very rule of law in the United States of America to say that one man is above the rule of law, and that's the President of the United States, who it said cannot be indicted or prosecuted for crimes committed as part of his official duties. Now, we've never had this in the United States before, but we have had something really similar that may surprise people. And that's that if you think about what happened in the American South from about 1874 to about 1965, we had a one-party region that essentially had overturned democracy and was ruled by a very small group of people. And in that American South, essentially, the states and the state legislatures decided how people would live within those states. They passed their laws that discriminated against people of color, Black Americans, and certainly discriminated against women. And at the same time, the way that that played out on the ground was that capital fled the region because there was no point in trying to invest in a factory, for example, in the American South, if who you knew was how would determine how well that factory would do. And similarly, even white Americans who theoretically would be privileged by this system, their lives too depended on who they knew. And so while we haven't seen the attempt at a national level to concentrate power in one single person in the United States, we have seen how the idea of a one-party system plays out. And it played out in the American South in a way that really destroyed the economy and destroyed equality.
To see the full interviews with Pete Buttigieg and Heather Cox Richardson, click the thumbnails right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also click the link on the screen for the audio version of this episode, and of course to see more of my content, the subscribe button's on the screen as well.